Hello, welcome, Victoria. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. For everyone listening, I'm Megan Moraes Gerzon. I'm host of Get Real, an own person podcast. And what we do is highlight inspiring individuals who are kind of taking their own path and being their own person in their career, in their life, and getting fulfillment. So, Victoria Peña, welcome. Feel free to introduce yourself, and then, I'd love to jump into your exciting path that you've been embarking on for a while now, and how you've turned burnout into a new beginning. So, really excited to dive into that.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and I've loved listening to your podcast so far. So thank you for having me.
Thanks.
So, as you said, my name is Victoria Peña. I am a burnout and performance coach. And so I work primarily with people who are feeling burnout or unfulfilled in their jobs, primarily in the corporate tech heavy sector. But lately I've been working with people from several different industries too. So, been doing this for about a year so far.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, we kind of mutually cheer each other on LinkedIn. We're connected, and we met from a mutual friend. And since then, we've kind of shared coaching advice and leadership advice and just building a business. And I love, the way your storytelling really highlights you from a personal perspective. And I love the vulnerability you infuse into your work. So, I've gotten ideas from that. So thank you for
Amazing. I love
your
it.
approach. Yeah, I really enjoy your content.
Thank you.
So can we go back to what prompted this? I know you were in kind of like the B2B corporate world for years, is that right? And then you ended up getting to the point where you hit a wall. So can you walk me through when you knew, maybe the moment you knew like this needs to stop?
Yeah, so it was a slow burn until it wasn't.
Mhm.
And I think everybody who goes through this journey of burnout, which is a loaded term these days, tends to experience it differently. So I'll just share my story, and hopefully parts of this may or may not resonate with certain people.
Mhm.
For about 6 months, I would say, I started to feel this level of apathy towards my job, frustration towards, certain people that I used to work with and get along with really well. And so there were a lot of really subtle signs that were telling me that things were starting to feel misaligned in my job, in a job that I once loved and thrived in and was constantly doing well and be giving promotions and closing deals and all of the things that people dream of, right? Especially in the corporate world.
Mhm.
And I was kind of ignoring it. I was planning a wedding at the time and I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm just stressed about the wedding, even though I wasn't stressed about the wedding. I was genuinely just really excited.
Yeah.
And once the wedding was over, I got back and I went back to my job. And it was this heavy, almost kind of like dark feeling that I just knew something was really off. And I didn't exactly know what it was. In my head, pivoting careers, questioning my job was kind of a shameful thing to do. It was wrong. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. And so I had these thoughts kind of just looping in my head of, okay, well, what does this mean? And I felt really stuck, to be honest. And a couple weeks later, I hopped on a call and there were several men who were presenting to me and they wanted me to share, their software with my customers. And I hopped on these calls a lot, but this one was different for me. I had noticed how passionate, excited, uh, genuinely thrilled they were to be on that call, just telling me about a software product. And I was like, okay, this is odd. At the time, and these days too, a lot of people on these calls, they don't show up with a lot of excitement. They don't show up with a lot of genuine passion about what they're doing. They're just kind of going through the motions and
Mhm.
they're turning it on to an extent. And so I really sensed this in these people because it was very different from what I was used to. And it's almost as if time froze in that moment. And rather than looking at that and being frustrated at myself for not feeling the same thing, it was almost as if I got this feeling, okay, you can have that too. Maybe this just isn't the thing for you. Maybe it's not software. Maybe it's not cybersecurity. And at that point, I didn't know exactly what it was or honestly what it wasn't, but I knew that that specific moment, that job was not for me anymore. And once I had accepted that, the burnout was already so far along that I didn't even realize, where I feel like there was no turning back. And the only option that I gave myself at that point was to quit and take some time for myself before I could figure out the next step.
Wow. That's a really interesting moment where you noticed the energy and the quality in someone else that you were like, I actually miss that and want that. And that it was kind of a hopeful thing for you, right? And reminded you of what it could be like. And then so when you got to that point, I mean, I'm sure there was some fear and anxiety around that because quitting is scary and it's uncertain, but it seemed like there was something in your gut that knew for your mental health and your happiness, that was the only option, right? Did you still feel a little bit scared and nervous when you did quit?
I wish I could say yes or no. It was yes and no and all of the above at
Yeah,
different times and
all
different
of the
moments
feels.
throughout the day. Of course, yeah. When I started to tell people in my company and outside of my company, even family members, I was constantly reminded that I'm leaving something really good behind. And when you are told that from people that you care about, that support you, that's really hard to hear because it makes you question everything. And to be honest, I'm thankful that they said those things because it did make me pause for whether it was a microsecond, a split second, whatever, and really think, okay, is this the right choice for me? Am I thinking ahead to what could be? Do I believe in myself? Do I know that my motivation will come back one day? All of those things that I really had to make sure logically, I couldn't pinpoint what that looked like or when it would be the case, but it was more of this intuitive gut knowing feeling that I know things will work out. And to be honest, I built such a strong network along the way. And this is the case with a lot of my clients and a lot of the people I work with. There's
Hmm.
always a plan B. And I think there's a lot of chatter in the world today, especially in the tech industry, about layoffs and the job market is so bad. But for
Yes.
the most part, we know people, we can get a job, we will figure it out. Life always works out that way. And so I think the more that we can tell ourselves too that we will always find a way to make it work, especially, I work primarily with this demographic I call high performers, that
Mhm.
high performer, demographic, these people will always have options for themselves. And that's kind of the realization that I had for me that was able to give me the peace of mind to move forward in this next step in my journey.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, I can relate on a personal level. I've told you some of my story, but
Mhm.
I also was at a B2B corporate role for years in the tech space and felt that burnout and that lack of motivation and spark. And I actually didn't quit. The timing worked out where I did get laid off, and it was actually the right moment and chapter for me. And then I felt similarly where I wasn't freaking out, and I said, you know what, I have my network. I know something will work out. And now I've been doing own person for several months and learned a lot along the way. And so that's really great that you felt that confidence in yourself and belief in what's meant to work out for you will, and you'll be okay. And the fact that you identified that specific persona of high performers, you could relate because that was you, right? And so it's like you've lived this and then you can share. And I think that's when it's most impactful is like you're practicing what you're preaching, you know what's helpful because you've been there, right? So um when in the early days of this new career and the pivot, first of all, I want to know, how did you land on this specific thing, the career coaching? And how did you figure out this is my person, this is how I want to kind of market everything?
So when I started, I was stressing out because once again, this high performer mentality, I was like, well, I have to get it right on the first go. I have to know exactly
Be
who my
perfect.
niche is. Yes, exactly. I have to know exactly who they are. I have to speak directly to them. And then there's no going back. I was so wrong. As you know, right? Throughout this process,
Trial
it's
and
a
error.
constant experiment, A/B test to what works and what doesn't. I think from a just logical perspective, but also from that passion and purpose that I know that I want to feel in my day to day. I had to make sure that I was leaning into the demographic and the niche that was making me excited. So, if I had, let's say, three different people that I was working with at one time at the beginning of my practice, and all of them were pretty different, which one was I genuinely excited to hop on the phone with? Which one did I hop off that call and I was like, I gained energy from the conversation versus just feeling drained afterwards. And so I had to be very mindful of that process early on. At the same time, it kind of happened naturally too. I originally got my coaching certification as a dual health and life coach, and I knew that I wanted to get it a bit higher level and cover both of those areas because I didn't know exactly what I wanted my niche to be. And when I started taking on clients initially, I went with a pretty health focused curriculum, framework, whatever you want to call it. And I very quickly learned, probably in the first 2 months of working with people, that, okay, I'm good at this, but it's not giving me that excitement that I know I want.
Mhm.
And with these people, we started to talk about work a little bit because I noticed that work was causing a lot of their stress. And I had noticed that when we had dove into that side of the conversation, I was one, really good at it. Two, realizing that I had experienced this myself. And three, we were able to walk away with very concrete action forward steps that then when we hopped on our next call, these people were already showing massive improvement in that area. And so for me, I was able to reflect on those situations and say, okay, well, that seems pretty natural and easy, right?
It was natural and everything was aligning. So, and
Yes.
I find it interesting that, in your own experience and then with working with different types of people and clients, you were focusing on health in your own way because you were, like you said, mindful and paying attention to your body and how you were reacting and feeling in your body. And
Hmm.
I think that says a lot about true health and well-being. The fact that you're tuned into that, because I try to do that on a daily basis. And like you said, understand what's giving you energy rather than draining your energy. So that's just really great that you were hyper aware of that and responded to that.
Yeah, and honestly, I had realized since I, encountered the burnout myself, that is a non-negotiable situation for me at this point because it is easy for me to get back into that state of heading towards burnout. And if I'm not caring for myself and practicing what I preach in those areas, I'm not going to be able to show up for my clients, for my future clients, for people that I'm helping, a friend in any way too. And so that's like number one importance for me in terms of my overall well-being.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, I feel the same way. And so I'm wondering, are there any examples where you're feeling yourself, being that high performer, and then you have to snap back and reel it in and practice what you preach for your clients? Can you think of any times where you have to do that, whether it's on a daily basis, just every so often?
Yeah, so it's kind of answering your question. It's kind of not at the same time, but I think this still goes back to high performer mindset and corporate mindset to an extent too. When I left my job and I started this company, my whole intent was to build a company and a life around what I want my life to look like between freedom and flexibility and the ability to go do a workout in the middle of the day, go on multiple walks, travel and take a few days off here and there and it not be a big deal, all of those types of things. And for me, I also notice these tendencies coming back where, I can be sitting on my computer and it's very easy for me to look at number of hours that I put into my job and output and productivity and success as a result.
Mm.
Some of my best performing, best results weeks have happened when I've been sick and I was kind of doing the bare minimum, or I was traveling and I was just attending to things in the background as needed. And I don't find that stuff very ironic, to be honest. I think there's a big energetic component in the way that I show up to my business. And if I'm sitting on my computer trying to do things that don't necessarily need to be done or being done with too much effort, that can put out, in my opinion, a bit of a grippy feeling towards the business overall. And that's not the energy that I want to put out. The energy that I want to put out is helping people to design a life that works for them. And if I'm not following through in that way for me, then why am I doing this?
That is just, first of all, a great reminder for myself, and I think just profoundly intelligent because it's you don't realize when you're kind of in that mode where you want to be productive and you're some days forcing yourself to, check things off and feel like, okay, I got enough done. I was productive. I'm doing well. But like you said, that's not the genuine energy that gives you the success you're looking for. Um, so how do you reflect that onto your clients? Because I think a lot of people tend to define success in a way that isn't actually what they want. Like you were saying, you were aiming for more of the freedom and flexibility and just being able to live your own life and be your own person, like I talk about. But people are, often with the ego, they get caught up in their title. And like I saw a post where you mentioned that a client didn't know who they were without their title. So
Mm.
how do you help coach people to redefine success and kind of plan for the life that will give them more energy?
So when I take on a new client, I notice a lot of consistent patterns, but as you would expect, all my clients are in completely different places, as I'm starting with them. So a lot of the way in which I coach them or potential exercises or frameworks that we're leveraging, those change client to client.
Mhm.
That being said, at the beginning, it's pretty much the same focus area that we have that I feel like is a really good anchor to the work that we're doing. And that is getting really clear on what their values are.
Mhm.
People can call them a lot of different things, but ultimately, that example that I gave for me, freedom, flexibility, joy, ability to travel, those types of things, those all go back to my values. And it is so common these days that people don't understand that about themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that because there's not a lot of opportunities for us in life to be asked that or to question those types of things. We're just kind of told what to do. And we say we value those things. And
Right.
so, and not to say we should throw those things away necessarily, but how can your values complement, you know, the company that you're working at, the friends that you have and their values, family, all of those types of things. And so the quicker more effective that they can get clear on their values, that guides all of the work that we do because it helps them to understand what is this new version or same version, right, of success look like to me and how can I integrate that into my day to day and how can I apply that from a work perspective? And then we can get really specific on the tools and practices that they need to course correct on.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes total sense. I think that's a strong starting point. Do you see that a lot of the times or sometimes people think they, like you were kind of saying, people think they know what their values are because that's what the way they've been brought up, that's what they've been told, but they actually don't understand like what matters to them and who they are authentically because in the work I do, I see a lot of people actually, I see surprise and um, sometimes people feel a bit uncomfortable at first because they think they know who they are and where they want to go, but then when, taking that first step to self-reflect and get a little deeper, they have to kind of rethink, what truly matters. Do you see that too?
Yeah, totally. And I think the number one thing that I try and do in those situations, and I'm sure you do the same thing, is to help them to realize that it is totally fine for them to be at that place. Because,
Mhm.
like I said, it is very, very normal. And I never want anybody to think that that is wrong or that they are behind by having not never done that work or maybe not even understanding, how to answer that question. And so I think a lot of people these days, if you were to just straight up ask them, what are your values or what do you value in life? I think a lot of things are related externally. So family, friends, money, success, accomplishment, all of those things. And I think a lot of those things can go into our personal values, but it's almost like if we were to remove everything around us and it's just you in this world, then what do you value? And so I have certain questions that I like to ask that helps them get to that very, very quickly and kind of cut out some of that stuff. Um, but yeah, it can be really hard for people to get clear on that and then arrive at an answer that they feel comfortable in that also aligns with them at this moment.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it seems like that's a great method that you just kind of cut to the chase and you're able to take out everything else that is noisy and confusing. Um, and so you were mentioning that, when you first realized you needed to change and you spoke to family and friends, something felt like wrong at first. You felt like, okay, I'm stuck, but this feels like I shouldn't feel this way. So I'm just thinking about, the folks I speak with, that what you were just explaining, and people initially are uncomfortable if they need to make a shift or feel like maybe they shouldn't be thinking this way. So, do you have any advice for someone who is in that situation where they're just hitting that wall and, just to reassure them that it's actually okay and normal?
Yeah, so I think there's several things you can do. I think one, if you have a trusted friend or family member that you feel like comes to a conversation with non-judgmental energy and can kind of see you where you're at, I think that's a
Mhm.
great place to start, just to be able to verbalize that stuff. If you don't have somebody that you can trust in that way, or if you want to do this additionally, I am a big fan of journaling and just writing down our thoughts on
Mhm.
paper. Whether you look at it several years from now or several weeks from now, whether you burn it, whether you tear it up because you're worried that somebody's going to read it, I think the more that we can get all of this noise out of our head into something else, it allows us to kind of desensitize the scariness around it, but also just kind of clear our minds a little bit too and not have to have it live up there all the time. Um,
Mhm.
and then there's, the obvious, which I think is working with a professional that knows this process and can assure you that this is not wrong and that you are not broken and that this is a very normal thing that a lot of people go through. I think one thing that a lot of coaches do, myself included, is they offer, free 30-minute, hour-long consultations to process through these things. And these are no obligation calls. So the more that you can kind of get out there and start having that conversation and trying to figure out who is the type of person that you may want to lean on for stuff like that, there's a lot of ways to do that with no strings attached.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just great that people like you offer that. And, it seems like what you mentioned is that judgment-free space. And when someone works with someone like you or I think that's what clicks and allows people to open up and share what they might have been journaling about, and just kind of you know, trust in the process and let their authenticity come out, is that, they're sharing without judgment and it's a safe space. So that's what I try to work on myself. And, you know, I on when I'm personally feeling stuck, I like to write. I write anyway all the time, but it just really helps, like you said, to get it all down and just, even if you're kind of spiraling in your head, just to get it all out. I find that's extremely therapeutic, and I recommend that to people as well. So, just to kind of think back on, one of your main goals was freedom, right? And just kind of living life your way. Um, can you share day to day now? What does freedom look like to you personally, professionally? How do you help people, use their starting point, mapping their values to that end state of having that flexibility in their lives?
So, and this is assuming that, flexibility is a priority for them. I will
Right.
say a lot of people that come to me are feeling stuck, whether it's, kind of like physically, I'm stuck in a location and I want to move elsewhere, I'm stuck in this job, or I just feel mentally stuck. And so I do think, to your point, flexibility often is something that a lot of those people do desire. But depending on what they are saying that they want in life, 6 years down the road, 9 months down the road, a year down the road, I like to ask that question around a year because I think it forces us to get out of our head a little bit for acknowledging our current circumstances and what's realistic and practical
Hmm.
versus what could actually be possible further out. And like I said before, then it's getting clear on values. It's getting clear on, okay, at the end of, X time of us working together, what do we want that to look like? What is this goal that we're working towards? And what's interesting too is at the beginning of our work, the client will set a goal for themselves and they always accomplish that goal. But there's always so many other things that come about that they didn't even realize that they wanted to work on that are very intertwined. And I see you
That's cool.
very much nodding because I'm sure you
Yeah.
experience this in your day to day too.
Yes.
That's what is so fascinating and exciting to me, I think personally, and with my own personal development and people that I work that I work with in a professional sense, but also me working with clients to see people get to these points where they're accomplishing things in their life that they didn't even think was possible, nor did they think they even wanted.
Mm.
That is so, so cool from my perspective.
Yeah, that's a game changer because you're opening completely new doors that I didn't even consider initially. And, everyone is evolving constantly. So it kind of allows people to be really fluid and open-minded and not just live in that box of, this was my life plan for forever, to shift. And it's surprising and exciting, like you said, to be on that journey with people and to be experiencing it yourself. Um, and so I was just thinking, now it seems like you're definitely having gratifying work. You're more excited. You have that feeling that you didn't have before you left your last role. And so, can you kind of think about yourself a few years back to now, and um, how would you describe how you're feeling in your day to day and your level of fulfillment compared to, like, I actually saw one of your recent posts where you attended an event on a Friday night and you were comparing
Yeah.
it to previous events. So I just want to, like, I'm thinking about that just juxtaposition of
Hmm.
how life was and how it is now.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I would actually love to talk about that because I think that is, I guess, just to give a little bit of backstory. So my company, Nova Mindset Coaching, went and did our first, in real life event
That's
sponsorship,
awesome.
which was very nostalgic for me of, when I was in cybersecurity, I did marketing sales. So I was always traveling to conferences and working the booth.
Yeah.
And they were fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, those conferences were awesome. I
Yeah.
love talking to people. But for you to represent, I'll say you to make that specific to me because this is not the case for everybody. I was missing an element of excitement with what I was selling behind the booth. And so I could only go so far. And what
Yeah.
I noticed thinking back is that I was just spending time connecting with people and I was having conversations and I was making friends and I'd see them later at happy hour and all of
Yeah.
those things. But now, full circle, I'm behind this booth selling something that I wholeheartedly believe in, that I've put my heart and soul behind, that I'm so excited to show up and talk about and build connections and do this on a Friday night, which if my company had asked me to do this several years ago, my boundaries would have been very strong up, right? Like I would have been like, oh no, that's family time, that's
It's
friend
a
time,
no.
whatever. Rightfully so. And in this situation, when I got invited to do it, I was like, heck yeah, that sounds like so much fun. And so it's just sometimes life takes these forms that you just never would have expected that it just works. I have the flexibility in my life and I have the desire to go stand behind a table and talk to people about my company for multiple hours on a Friday night. And so why not? And so I think a lot of that is just representative of the fluidity in my life that I've been able to embrace as a result of this because that has been so important to me and because I've put that first in building this company.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm just so happy that you had such a positive experience with that. And I think it says a lot. It says everything that you were like, well, where else would I want to be? Yes, I want to do
Yeah.
this. And you're not putting it on, it's not forced. I mean, I've been in the same exact situation where I was doing content marketing for, database management. And you can only be so enthusiastic at a certain point if you're not a database person. So when you're speaking about something, that is your heart and soul and your baby and your passion project, you can tell the difference. And people, I'm sure, gravitated to you even more. I'm sure you had a lot of great conversations back in the day, but I'm sure you had even more energetic connections because it was genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Totally.
that's so cool. Um, I think I only have my last thought. You've been active and committed to what you're doing for, you said, a year now. So are there any goals that you're working towards? Like, what do you see as your next phase or next steps that you would love to achieve in terms of how you're helping your clients, how you're, what you're offering and how? I'm just kind of curious what's next.
Yeah. So I think the first year, almost a year of my business has been really focused on building my one-on-one business, which is me working with clients over a 4-month period and working specifically towards their goals, which I wholeheartedly want to continue on because I think that's going to be the foundation of my business and ultimately what I really love to do. The next phase for me, which I'm already starting to do, is now to branch out more into the corporate side of things. And so I want to be able to work with companies to allow their employees to feel that balance and be able to take a deep breath every once in a while. I think there's a misconception behind workplace well being, work life balance,
Hmm.
prioritizing your health, that your success and your metrics are going to dip, especially in the sales realm, because I work a lot with sales reps and sales executives.
Hmm.
But that is so not true. And I've seen it firsthand with the people that I work with when they start to prioritize themselves and get clear on what they want in life and how that can integrate into their job. 95% of my clients have ended up staying in their jobs by choice. And when they make that decision, they're showing up more productive, more excited, more fulfilled at the end of the day. And that's not just benefit to them, that's benefit to the company, that's benefit to the bottom line, revenue. And so I have this kind of newfound mission inside me to work with corporations to have happier, healthier employees and see their revenue and productivity go up at the same time.
That gets me really excited because it's so needed. I mean, we've been in corporations, we've lived it, and we see how many people are, and we talk to friends who are just not actually happy in their roles and they have to grind and they feel like the companies just expect them to deliver more, more, more. And like you said, that's not really the case. And it shouldn't be, you know, the norm, and it shouldn't be, people shouldn't experience that pressure because it's extremely unhealthy and it doesn't actually garner the results they're looking for in the first place. So I think, like you said, the focus on what you actually get excited about, what matters to you, that drives so much more productivity. I actually spoke to someone recently about the fact that connection is a productivity hack. So when people feel
Yeah.
connected, when they feel um, heard and, given the space, not micromanaged, but they're given the space to, do their job well and trusted to do what they're there to do, it's a game changer. So that's really cool, and I think you'd be a great person to help corporations and individuals even more on that path. So
I appreciate it. And to further back up what you just said, I actually just read a book called Meaningful Work that approaches meaningful work more from the organizational level. And
mm,
they said there's three pillars to meaningful work within an organization, but also really on the employee level too. And it's exactly what you said. The number one is community/connection and whatever
hmm
that means to them. Two is contribution, and three is challenge. And I've started to implement that more into my work as well because it's a very good tool to kind of ask somebody, okay, well, what are you missing here? And I even think
I'm
back
gonna
to
use
my
that.
yeah, right. And I even think back to my situation too. And I'm like, what was I missing in my job? Because there's always going to be something out of balance. There's never a perfect situation, right? But it shows us the areas that we can put more effort into that we are lacking at the moment, which
Mhm.
can help to even the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, get back to that balance, and you can't just have one thing. You need the full scope of those three things you mentioned. Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree with that. Cool. Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation, and I'm going to continue to follow what you're doing. I love watching you shine, and it seems like you're just living your best life. So props to you, and I'm happy we're connected.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. I love following you. And I remember when you and I think, met for the first time and you told me your company name, Own Person. I was like, yes, I freaking love that. Like, it's
Thank
so
you.
good. It encompasses so much. And I think you're going to continue to help so many people. So I'm very excited
Thank
for you.
you. Oh, well, that means a lot. Cool. Well, take care, and we will talk soon.
Alrighty. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.